Here I go. In this talk and session, I'm going to share quite a lot of personal experience. And I'm doing this because I want to use it to illustrate some general points that I think are not about my experience, but help with the learning for me and perhaps all of us. And so at some point, I will pause and I will give you an opportunity to reflect on your own experiences based on the topics I've been exploring using my own experience. I've also written my talk out, and I've got it here because my memory is like a sieve these days, so I may read quite a bit of it, I may not, so that'll depend on how I get on, but it's here for me to read so I don't lose things that are important to me and I want to share with you. So we were invited to choose one of the Hijiri related quotes as a theme for our talk, and two in particular spoke to me, as I think you know, and one is the one we just explored. Birth into the Pure Land does not depend on saying the Nembutsu once. It does not depend on saying it many times. It depends on the heart. And what speaks to me from this quotation is it depends not on a specific action or practice, but on the heart, and perhaps that connection through love. So that's what I take from that quote. The other quote I've chosen is, "An infant turns to its mother without any idea why. There is simply an utter reliance, and trusting yourself to the name is like this." So the mother and the newborn instinctively connect. That's the message I take from that. It was the way in my imagination the two interacted that was of particular interest, hence my title. Birth into the Pure Land depends on the heart as an infant turns to its mother without any idea why. As an infant turns to its mother without any idea why describes the infant's reflex, a response of the heart, the body's reflexive response, as is the mother's heartfelt response. They bond in that way. This has been described as the love body, which is necessary for the survival of the human species. It's only that connection that ensures that newborns get the support they need and the bonding that they need. But then another question arose for me. What if the mother is not there? This is of interest to me because my mother was not there. She nearly died when I was born. And I was fed initially by the woman in the next bed in the maternity ward. Naturally, this will have consequences for how my life developed. Dependent origination, everything arises upon conditions. And now I have insights into those consequences that relate to the first part of the title. My birth in the Pure Land depends on the heart, the entrusting heart that bonds. But that heart of my mother wasn't there for me to bond. My page over. Of course, I'm not alone in having had a shaky bonding at the start of life. And attachment theory, you may know, provides explanations for how we build relationships in adult life, depending on the bonding patterns in our early years. For me, trusting or entrusting is fraught with doubt. A consequence has been difficulty trusting someone will be there for me. Another life event when I was 6 years old added to this. Because of an infectious disease, scarlet fever, I had to go into an isolation hospital for 6 weeks, and my parents were not allowed to visit. While there, it was discovered I also had measles, so I was doubly isolated in a room of my own, rather than being with other children. The culture at that time was that hospital staff were not allowed to develop relationships with the children because there was a belief it would upset them. I have studied with considerable interest the research on this culture of paediatric care at that time. It was unintentionally cruel, especially for younger children. And when they were discharged back to their families, the relationship with the mother, the primary caregiver, had been fractured. Not understanding the full circumstances, we blamed our mother. It was the first opportunity, when we felt safe enough, to show our distress, our anger, and despair. My relationship with my mother never fully recovered, probably exacerbated by the broken bonding at the start of my life. It must have been hell for my mother. As a child at a similar age to me, her bond with both her parents was broken. Her father died, and her mother had to go out to work immediately to feed the family. She told me she hated coming home from school to an empty house. As Pure Land Buddhists, we're invited to entrust ourselves to Amida Buddha. How is this influenced by whether we can trust relationships? My personal experience is that it's been difficult. In my 20 years married to Sundari, fully trusting she would be there for me was at times problematic for at least the first 10 years. But perhaps amazingly, the devastation that I experienced when she died has somehow contributed to a transformation of some sort. It was strong medicine and still is. Most important was recognizing that I experienced Amida Buddha in Sundari, that she was the bright reflection of Amida's light in my life, but that she wasn't the source. When she was no longer physically there, I began to realize, extraordinarily, that she was no longer the source. And this has encouraged me to directly connect with the true source. Out of this seems to have risen the possibility of entrusting myself to Amida Buddha, at least some of the time. And I'm sharing my life experiences as a stepping stone to a larger question. Why are we the way we are? And that question is for us all. So actually, even though I'm only 10 minutes into my talk, I want to give you a bit of time to reflect on that now. So I'm proposing a few minutes of reflection where you just have a few minutes to reflect on what I've said about the early part of my life and about love and entrusting and your relationship with Amida Buddha or any other form of Buddhism or spirituality. It doesn't have to be just about Amida Buddhism or any other form of Buddhism. How your life is being shaped and what experiences in your younger life might have led to that shaping of where you are in life and spiritual practice now. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to reflect on that, and then when you come back, I'll carry on and we'll have a general sharing at the end. So I also suggest and recommend you maybe write a few notes on paper if that seems appropriate. So if you haven't got any paper, do get some if you need to. So we'll have 4 or 5 minutes now. Thank you. Okay, another minute or so. Looking as if some of you are ready and one or two might be just making a further note or two. Okay, so I'll continue. So why are we the way we are? A simple answer for someone who knows a bit about Buddhism might be, it's our karma, stupid. But what does that actually mean? What might we learn about how and why we are in the world? From an other power perspective, perhaps it doesn't matter. That's just the way we are. But in my understanding, this is not the all of it. We develop skills. We have potential, apaya, skillful means. That's important. Maybe we do have a purpose for being here. Some of us have taken vows. They help to shape our purpose. Those who have ordained in the Amida community will have chosen and taken a personal vow. That may indicate a commitment to how we intend to be in the world. I'll come to mind a bit later. Our personal and collective histories may have influenced why we have chosen the particular path that we're on. Those of you here now will at least have a passing interest in Pure Land path. And we welcome diversity. We've been talking about that earlier this afternoon. Within the Amida community, we have the Wide Road West, an opportunity and an invitation to explore which of the several Pure Land teachers and teachings speak to us most clearly and strongly. We have an opportunity to explore and experiment with what we're less familiar with too, a treat for the curious. So another question that occurs to me as I was writing this, do the teachers and teachings we are drawn to evolve over time? Have you ever paused to ask yourself why you have made the choices, why you have the preferences that you have? That question interests me. Choices made are probably not random, even if not wise at times. I'm interested that some of the distinguished Buddhist teachers of our time have switched between major schools of Buddhism as they learn and develop, Tibetan to Theravadan, Zen to Pure Land, and vice versa, and so on. What's that about? Someone might say that their loyalties have shifted, perhaps with an implication that that is in some way wrong. But maybe that is precisely what is needed. Indeed, a bodhisattva is going to break new ground, as has happened many times in history. This would be an interesting piece of research, the moments when and why teachers make a quantum leap. Perhaps someone has researched this. I don't know. You might have some ideas we can talk about later. Reminding ourselves we're not fixed beings, it seems likely that needs and circumstances will change as we evolve. Indeed, the most fundamental of Buddhist teachings, non-self or no fixed self, would suggest we will evolve, not by our choice, but our choices may be significant when we notice the changes taking place. Something happened a couple of weeks ago, significant enough for me to bring it into this talk. I discovered the Vimalakirti Sutra. Some of you know this. I discovered the Vimalakirti Sutra. Initially one of the articles that Tricycle magazine puts out daily online. The title of the article is The Bodhisattva's Illness and the World's Cure. The author, Mark Herrick, is a Nichiren teacher. I brought it up at our Tuesday Sangha group, and I learned that the Heartland Zen group, that Carol's part of, has been studying it. In fact, it's been a theme of several Dharma talks that Will has given in recent years. Via the Tricycle article, a quotation from the Vimalakirti Sutra. The Bodhisattva loves all living beings as if each were his only child. He becomes sick when they are sick, and he is cured when they are cured. The sickness of the Bodhisattvas arises from great compassion. The message of the Vimalakirti Sutra is that the Bodhisattvas, and probably those who aspire to the Bodhisattva path, suffer as a result of their compassion. It might be worth noting that the root of the word compassion, deriving from Latin, is suffering with. Mark Herrick writes, "What if my persistent sense of being broken wasn't evidence of my practice's failure, but was rather the practice itself?" I'm going to say that again. What if my persistent sense of being broken wasn't evidence of my practice's failure, but was rather the practice itself? I can relate to that, and maybe you can too. We share the world's suffering, and there's plenty to go around. My personal vow, when taken when I ordained some 20 years ago, was to hear the cries of the world. It was my personal vow because I recognized my ability to insulate myself from pain and suffering, even in a spiritual context, known as spiritual bypassing. The personal vow was there to remind me not to fall into this numbness. With a greater understanding, when I renewed this vow a couple of years ago, I added an extra piece. That is the principles by which the Zen peacemaker community practices. With an attitude of not knowing, leading to bearing witness, leading to compassionate action. As the cries of the world intensify, I've at times said to myself, be careful what you wish for. Part of this Pure Land Sangha is life-sustaining for me. Yeah, I need to say that again. Being with you, being part of this community is life-sustaining for me. In addition, I've taken action to support my capacity to bear suffering. This is somatic experiencing therapy, and it works by supporting my body to experience the full intensity of life's experiences. Happiness, joy, contentment, fear, avoidance, containment, loss, grief, and despair. Developing the capacity and the intelligence of my body to allow the intensity. The death of Sundari had plunged me into this without choice. I told myself I need to use my curiosity to learn about being broken open. The only alternative would probably have been bodily denial, stiff upper lip as we Brits are known for. One thing I did was to study contemporary research on bereavement and grief, and then explore how that applied to me and what would be helpful. Of particular interest was some research by Robert Nehemiah and colleagues that showed that the Kisargotami Sutra, the Mustard Seed Sutra, was effective when used in a therapeutic context with people recently bereaved. I can say more about this loss and grief later if you wish, but for now I'd like to return my attention to why I've chosen this title for my talk and what I have learned. So, birth in the Pure Land depends on the heart, as an infant turns to its mother without any idea why. Is it true? Well, my learning is the lack of bonding as an infant, the lack of the necessary co-regulation with the mother, creates an existential distress and leads to an expectation that basic needs will not be met. And then the best option is self-sufficiency. And that self-sufficiency is built on difficulty trusting. So if the infant does not get what it instinctively needs, that makes the journey to the Pure Land more arduous. The arduous path is actually the Bodhisattva path, whether one knows it or not. We each have our unique path through life, given the cards we are dealt, basically other power, combined with the opportunities that present themselves, an element of self-power, how opportunities are responded to. Personally, I now know I missed a lot of opportunities. I missed a lot of opportunities throughout my childhood and youth. My saving grace is what seems like a limitless curiosity about why things are the way they are. This has enabled me to see the mistakes I make, and if I give up, only temporarily. This next and final section of my talk draws on the tricycle article by Mark Herrick. Initially, I approached Buddhism and its practices as if they were medicine, expecting meditation in the context of Amida, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to fix what was wrong with me. But Vimalakirti suggests something more unsettling. What if the illness is awakening? What if the illness is the awakening? The Bodhisattva's sickness isn't a problem to be solved, but a manifestation of connection. He lies on his bed, not despite his realization. He lies on his bed, not despite his realization, but because of it. The deeper his understanding of interdependence, the more intimately he experiences the world suffering in his own body. This isn't metaphorical, it's visceral, immediate, unavoidable. What if this persistent sense of unwellness isn't a pathology, but a perception, not a personal failure, but my participation in a larger brokenness that includes and yet extends far beyond my individual psyche. This is still a quote from the article in Tricycle. This isn't to excuse my reactive patterns or to justify spiritual bypassing. The depression is still real. The anxiety still needs tending. The unwholesome behaviors still require attention. But maybe their persistence doesn't mean I'm doing my practice wrong. Maybe it means I'm doing it right, not just in the way I expected. So I'm still quoting Mark Herrick, but this could be me speaking too. I spent 50 years assuming that I was one of the deluded children, waiting for the moment when I'd finally accept the medicine and be cured. But what if I'm also the physician, carrying the antidote for the poisoning that extends far beyond my personal symptoms? What if my outgoing struggles aren't evidence of failed treatment, but necessary medicine for a sickness that includes my family, my community, and my culture? This reframes everything. The anxiety I experienced isn't just my neurochemistry misfiring. It's also a response to collective uncertainty. The depression isn't merely personal pathology. It's grief for a world that seems increasingly fractured. The reactive patterns aren't just my individual karma, they're participation of cycles of harm that stretch across generations. I'm still quoting Mark Herrick because I relate to it, and I'm interested in if you might also be interested in this. The world is sick, and therefore I am sick. But this isn't tragedy. It's the very pulse of compassion. In accepting my persistent unwellness as potentially sacred rather than shameful, I discovered that the medicine was never meant to cure me completely, but to help me stay present and hold both suffering and healing in the same embrace. Maybe after 50 years, this is what practice looks like. Not the absence of brokenness, but the presence of love. Love big enough to include it, and the willingness to show up again and again for this moment's version of being human together. And I may be talking about and to a sangha of foolish Hijiri who come together in love and friendship. That's us. Perhaps we've come together as Hijiri in love and friendship. And I now want to give each of you a few moments to reflect, and then we're going to open up for conversation. So 3 or 4 minutes. Namo Amrita Boo.